So, hi everybody, and back to the DataDice YouTube channel. Today we would like to talk about a topic yeah, we have since years, I would say, but we never did a real video about that, and that's the Google Tag Manager, from the basics till very detailed way of implementing it. So, stay tuned, enjoy.
Yes, so today GTM with Thomas and me. And yeah, because I checked
Me means Alex.
Alex,
By the
yes,
way.
exactly, as usual. So because I checked our YouTube channel and I found out that we are always already mentioned all the new GTM stuff going on and so on, but we never talked about GTM itself.
But what's
In this-
GTM?
That's the question. Yes, so we would like just to talk about the essentials and what you have to do, what is about GTM, what you have to know, and so on. Yes, and also all the tracking part itself, because for sure, Google Tag Manager (GTM) is responsible for tracking your website at first. So it's Google's solution already for a long time. I think you mentioned sometimes when it got published, but I also don't know, to be honest.
I'm not quite sure if it was the year when it was published, but it should be something around 2012. I started using it 2013, beginning of 2013. It was super fun because there was no documentation from Google side at all.
As usual.
As usual when Google is starting a product. And it was different times. So now half of the world is using it. There are millions of like how to do it, how to use it, courses, workshops, good YouTube channels who are just covering tracking with Google Tag Management. Back in the days, there was nothing, and also things like tracking your e-commerce site, like product clicks, which was kind of available from the beginning. We can go into that in a deeper way, but no one knew how to do it. No one knew how to use the data layer at the beginning, at least not in a very performant way. But it was amazing times.
Yes. So GTM is responsible for tracking the user behavior on your website. So for that, you have your website, then you have to add a GTM snippet. We can also quickly talk about that later. So that then you have the connection between your website and the GTM, so that they both can work together. And then you can do implementations in the GTM, which we can also discuss later more in detail. And then in a later step, you are then setting in GTM the connections from your website / from GTM to all the different marketing and analysis tools you have, like GA, GA4, Google Ads, Facebook, Instagram, Bing, whatever, all the stuff you have. Yes, so that's the rough idea of it. In terms of what are the biggest advantages of the GTM, so using a GTM, because for sure you could also do all the tracking code in your website itself, so you can code it in your website already. But GTM has some advantages, I would say. So I think one of the biggest advantages is always that it's not part of the IT itself, so of the website developers, so that usually also the marketing people who are then also checking the data in Facebook, in Google Analytics, whoever, can also already do the implementations, because at least the basic ones are quite easy. And for that, you don't have to say, okay, I want now to add Pinterest tracking to my website, so I don't have to go to the IT department of our website and say, here, can you implement that code and that, and so on and so on. So you can do that stuff in GTM directly, and can also monitoring and configure it there, which is quite good.
Yeah. Maybe as a little bit more visual way how to see that, GTM is nothing more than a container. And in this container, all the settings, rules, implementations of whatever information you would like to send from your website to any other place, to any third-party tool, to your own services, and so on. So whatever information you would like to send somewhere when something is happening on your website, you can do that with GTM with this container. And this container is like the content of that container is isolated from your website. So it's not stored. It can be, but it's not stored inside your web domain or inside your website. That means you just have a reference to this container. If you would like to change something inside the Google Tag Manager, you can do that in the front end of GTM. And the moment you update your version, like you deploy your container, it gets deployed to wherever the container is located, but you don't need to make changes on your website. And that's the beauty basically of having a tag management system. It's not only GTM from Google, there are plenty more, but it's the most, I cannot say most important, but the most known one, due to the fact that a lot of people are working with Google Analytics, and then it's the easiest way to implement that and combine that. On top of this container we talked about, the container is just a big JavaScript.
At the end, then, yes. Follow.
See it as one big JavaScript file where all the small JavaScript or whatever code there is inside are located inside. There's all the rules inside for delivering those small JavaScript parts. And at the end, everything is a very big JavaScript file. That's the container. So, and on top of this container, there's also a kind of object store. This is called the data layer. And the data layer is an additional part of this container script. So you have 3, 4, 5 lines of container script where you just say, okay, load this huge JavaScript file from somewhere, wherever it's located. And then you have in addition this data layer. That's just a object variable in your website. And this is at the end an object stack. So you can push information inside, variables, objects, arrays, lists, whatever you need, you can put inside. Every variable, every object is just once inside. So you can override it and then the old one will be gone. Yeah. But the moment you add a new object, it's just added. Yeah? So you can just populate the data layer, can say, okay, I have a new variable, new object. I'm pushing that inside. That will not change all the other objects and variables which are already in.
Yeah, I think the only important thing is that you have the correct name for that object variable, right? So that's really data layer with a uppercase L, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, because Google said somewhere, hey, if you want to use GTM and you want to send data from your website to GTM, you can use a usual website variable under the window object, and there you can. So that just need to be called data layer, so that's important. And then already GTM knows, okay, here's the data layer variable, and from that variable I get all the information I need.
Can even change the name data layer, right?
But, so in the GTM snippet, so in the container snippet you are setting to your website, there's a you have to find where it is because it's a cryptic for sure, cryptic source or code then at the end. But there's a way where it shows data layer, and that one you can change then too.
Yeah, but it maybe goes a little bit too far for the moment. Yeah, but you can of course change this name. And one thing I would like to correct. It stores all the information, all the variables, all the objects, but with every page view, depending on how you implement it on your website, the data layer is initialized again. So it's basically rewritten in an empty way. That means the moment you go to the next page and you don't have a single page application, but you get a new page view, the data layer will be empty again. Yeah, so keep that in mind. You can set up that in a different way, but normally it's done that with every page view, there's an empty data layer. Yeah, then it starts stacking the objects and variables and
which is usually also good that it's like that. Sometimes you would also say, here we need to persist and value also for the next page views that you can also then do with cookies, session storage, however, a little bit more complicated. But yes. Yeah. Also, and important for the GTM snippet, it should be quite at the top of your website. So in the header part at least. I mean, even there as most top, how do you say? So at the top of your website. Yes, exactly. That is quite.
Google says at the beginning of the header, I think, right?
But I think a lot of.
So whatever you do in marketing, they all tell you put it on top of the header. Problem is there's only one top of the header. There's one thing which is important. Before the body is starting, GTM should be implemented. Otherwise, everything which is happening before basically this GTM container is loaded will not, you cannot take that into account, or the other way around. So if GTM is not there, you cannot track something. Makes sense. That comes for the script itself, but also for the data layer, obviously.
Exactly. Yes. So anything more important about essentials of tracking? So for
And
sure,
the data layer should be initialized before the script, ideally. You can also do it directly afterwards, but you could run into a race condition if you trigger directly on something which is coming from the data layer. Do it beforehand, that's smarter. So data layer, initialization, and then the script of the GTM.
Yes. So then for the data layer, you have then usually, or let's say you have two ways. So sometimes, especially for universal ethics, but now also in some kinds for GA4, you have these so-called e-commerce events, enhanced e-commerce events, which GTM is just getting. So that means your data layer variable needs to have a certain structure. So for example, let's take an add to cart. So you have on your website a usual usual e-commerce store, and the user is adding something to the cart. At the moment the add to cart got performed and it was successful, you can throw a data layer push to GTM with all the necessary information in the right format. We can also show a link in the description where you see that even for GA4 and for universal ethics, if still needed. But there you then also see the differences, which is quite good. Yes, and when that data layer has the exact correct structure in terms of how the tree structure is implemented, and also the name of the variables and the values, then you don't need to do nearly nothing in GTM. You just pass all the information from the GTM already to GA4 to get the data there. That just should, or that just I just want to display, I just want to show what is important in terms of the data layers. So you have these usual events like add to cart. You also have a defined one for purchase and so on and so on. But you can also do for sure a lot of custom stuff. And there's always, we always have to find, or you have to find a good way when you're doing everything on your own on GTM and when you're using the data layer. That we can also maybe quickly talk about. Because let's take an easy example. You want to track a newsletter sign up. So for that, there is no detailed data layer implementation documented or something like that. But for sure, you can do it on two different ways. So you can say in data layer, in GTM, you can say, okay, please, when the user clicks on that button with the ID, with the class, whatever, then please throw an event, because I know when these conditions are happening, the user clicks on a newsletter sign up. Now you have different, there can be different possibilities or different difficulties. It can happen, for example, that the user didn't had typed in the correct email address, for example. Then you're getting an error message. But maybe when you didn't make your tracking configuration correctly, you already throw the event that the user signed up, but there was an error because the user already clicked on sign up, but it didn't happen. That could be.
Maybe to say that again quite clearly, what you, with a very easy implementation, what you're doing is you have the submit button, for example, of this newsletter event, and you say the moment it got clicked, I would like to send an information to GA4, for example. So if you typed in a wrong email, your ad was missing, your was no correct style of the email address, then you click on this button, and there's one thing which would happen afterwards, would give you an error, but the click on the button would still happen. So and this is what you trigger on. That means your tag that there was a new newsletter sign up would be sent to GA4, but in reality it would not have been happened.
Yes, exactly. Another thing could be is for sure happening sometimes when the developers of the website changing the ID, changing the class name, whatever you are referring to in the GTM, and then your tracking is not working anymore and nobody knows it, maybe just when they then look at GA4 or whatever and sees that there are no signups anymore. Yes. And so for that, you could do, for example, a data layer push. So you can say, okay, please IT, so therefore sure you need then again the developers, please, when the user successfully submitted a data layer push, submitted a newsletter sign up, then push some information to the data layer we can then catch in the GTM. And when somebody changes the newsletter sign up due to whatever reason, the developer already sees, wait, but here's a data layer push. Maybe he even doesn't know what a data layer push is, but at least he saw that there's something, and he can then ask, or she can then ask people who maybe knows that stuff. Yes, and then that is not happening that much. There are also, I would say, hybrid models. So, for example, you could say, please give us good data for a newsletter sign up. I have not
But it
the
would
best.
still work for the newsletter sign up. So imagine you don't say when the newsletter, the email address is submitted correctly, when this is happening, then your IT throws an information like an event to the data layer and says, okay, here there was something happening, everything was correct, it was validated, please, here's the event, and then you can trigger on this event in the data layer. That's good because nothing can happen anymore. But as Alex said, it requires, again, your IT to do something. And with the hybrid model, Alex means you can also say at the beginning when you program your website, hey, for certain things, I would like to have something triggered. It can be a data layer push for multiple things, but it can also be that we say, please, on this button, give me some data tracking attribute inside the code, like inside the div, and maybe this div is only shown when this request was validated. So maybe it goes a little bit too far at the moment. There are some optimizations. Maybe let's not go into that much detail because it's also without pictures and so on quite hard to visualize. But a good way to do the data layer implementation is talk to your developers before and tell them what kind of information you need. Yeah? And newsletters submit could be one of them, where you have a validation process beforehand. So you would like to have something the moment this validation was running through. Second thing is think about, for example, sliders on the main page, or like product recommendations. You have no idea what kind of recommendations you will use in the next weeks or months, and you have no idea what kind of products maybe there are inside. But what you know is whenever there's a click on some product recommendation on any site, in any form, please send me in the data layer an event, hey, there was a click on a recommendation. So if this happens, then you have already an element inside the data layer that there was a click happening. And with this, you can trigger then or trace back to the real element, like product ID, like whatever information there are inside. You can catch them then from the front end, but this trigger, like this event which was happening, is coming basically from your development side, like from the front end developers, which is good. And as Alex said, there are two things. First of all, you will always know when something is happening. And second of all, if there's a refactoring on the website and you set that, then the whole development team will see that there's something happening. Yeah? When some recommendation box is used and something is clicked, then there is an active push to the data layer. So every developer will ask, okay, when I change something here, here's a push to somewhere. So he will actively ask for, is there something we have to discuss beforehand? And this is of course not happening if you as the tracking specialist, like just go to your own website, do something with CSS classes and try to trigger it yourself. Your development team doesn't know about something. They do a refactoring, your whole tracking will break down and no one will like recognize that. That's the upside at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. So are there any more important essentials for GTM? So
I mean, we forgot one very important part at the beginning, right? There are basically two ways how to implement the Google Tag Manager and how to track certain things doing which are happening on your website. And maybe you can.
Yeah. So I think we just can mention it so that there are two possibilities. We can discuss it later in another video. So we now talked more about the client-side containers. That is what you mean, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Yes. So that is the usual way. And you have a little bit more advanced one, which is now coming more and more, and the first versions got published 1-2 years ago, I think, is that you also now have additionally a server-side container at the end. So then, just as a rough overview, you have then your website, you have still your client-side container usually, and you have then at first the client-side container is pushing the data to a server-side container, and then the server-side container then send the data to all the marketing stuff.
Yeah, let's discuss a little bit more in detail. That means client-side implementation, your container is inside your web code, like your website code. It's basically initialized there, the data layer is initialized there, and you have all the single tags inside this container. And based on your rules and your triggering, it will send to Google Analytics for Facebook, Google Ads, all the marketing sources you might have, marketing partners, but maybe also other like third-party tools you would like to send information to. The problem with that is it's completely transparent to everyone, because you can easily like look inside your website and see what's happening. You see every single tag which is like being fired. You see all the information who got passed to the other services. This is the first issue. The second issue is it also is a big issue to your site speed, because everything is running inside your website, and the website is fully loaded when every single pixel or all the pixels are being fired. So, and the moment you optimize quite heavily for SEO, like for search engine optimization, this is an important thing to have the site speed as low as possible till the full site was loaded. And therefore, you also have server-side tracking. That means you have only one piece of information with then a little bit more information, because it's all packed in one like box. And this one package you send to your server. So you have an own server which is completely aside or completely independent from your website. It's in the same domain normally. That makes at least data privacy issues a little bit less complicated. So it's in your domain, and you send all the informations to your server domain. And there you catch all the information and then distribute them to all the tags you have with client-side tracking in the client. So to GA4, to Facebook, to I don't know. And coming back to the disadvantages of client-side, that's an advantage of server-side, because no one can see what in your own server obviously is happening. So you only see this one big chunk of information going somewhere, but you don't see which channels are or to which channels, to which marketing partners, and so on the data have been pushed to. And second thing, you only have this one package which is blocking your server speed, your website speed, and the rest is happening on your server, which is independent from your page load time.
Yes, so I would say in the next videos we can go a little bit more in detail in the whole client server side, because they also recognize that there are also, especially people who are not that, for sure, not that experienced with these technologies, they have also some struggles with that. Yes, and we can also talk about some more tips and tricks for GTM and so on in the next episodes. Yes?
Yeah, good. That was maybe a first good overview. If you have questions, if you have some parts where we should go deeper inside, also in the next videos, put that also in the comments. That gives us a little bit more feedback and help how to or what to describe more or more detail. And yeah, follow our channel, subscribe. Also check out all the other channels we have on Medium. We have kind of cool topics about ChatGPT, about like data analytics in general on our Medium blog post channel, so to say.
You have still LinkedIn, where we are pushing every week a lot of new posts about new Google techniques, new features, but also team things, and so on and so on. Yes, and for sure subscribe to our YouTube channel, as Thomas already said. And then, yeah, see you in the next episodes.
Bye.
See you.